As you know, we have been studying all that the Bible has to say about the subject of spiritual gifts, and so we're going to continue looking at that today. We have been looking at the gifts in three major categories. We've been looking at the gifted offices, we've been looking at the edifying gifts, and we've been looking at the sign gifts. That first category of the gifted offices, we learned that there were four. There were the office of apostle, the office of prophet, the office of evangelist, and then the office of shepherd teacher. We call that pastor. We learned that the offices of apostle and prophet, they have ceased. We don't have those offices anymore. But that the offices of evangelist and shepherd teacher are still alive and very active in the church today. We then moved into that second category of the permanent edifying gifts. And as I have studied and organized the gifts as they're listed in Scripture, we have identified 11 of these that are permanent edifying gifts. And we have divided these 11 into two categories that Peter told us about in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. He says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." Verse 11, "Whoever speaks," that's one kind of gift, "as one who speaks the oracles of God. Whoever serves," that's the other kind of gift, "as one who serves by the strength that God supplies." So, in the permanent edifying gifts, we have seen them in these two categories of the speaking gifts and the serving gifts. And we started with the speaking gifts. We learned there were 5 of them. The first is the gift of prophecy. The gift of prophecy. This is the gift, the Spirit-given ability to proclaim God's truth to others. So the gift of prophecy is simply that. It is the Spirit-given ability to proclaim God's truth to others. The second speaking gift was the gift of the word of knowledge. And this is, the gift of the word of knowledge is the Spirit-given ability to observe biblical facts and to make conclusions. We then talked about the third speaking gift, which is the word of wisdom. And the gift of the word of wisdom is the Spirit-given ability to make skillful application of God's word. We then talked about speaking gift number 4, which is the gift of teaching. And the gift of teaching is the Spirit-given ability to pass on biblical truth to someone else so that they can receive it and implement it. And then we talked about the gift of exhortation. The gift of exhortation is the Spirit-given ability to provide comfort, to provide courage, and to strengthen the spiritual life of those who need it. We then talked about how these 5 speaking gifts, how they work together. I love this. Prophecy proclaims the truth. The word of knowledge clarifies the truth. The word of wisdom applies the truth. Teaching shares the truth. And exhortation requires the truth. But then last week we started by looking at the first 3 of the serving gifts. Serving gift number 1 was leadership. Leadership. The gift of leadership is the Spirit-given ability to see an objective, to formulate a plan, to mobilize a group of people, and to complete an objective. Serving gift number 2 was the gift of helps. And this was the Spirit-given ability to take a burden off of somebody else and to place it on yourself. And then we learned about the spiritual gift of giving, which is the Spirit-given ability to give toward a need without any thought of holding back. Today we're going to pick up right where we left off, and we're going to look at the remaining 3 serving gifts. So here we go. Serving gift number 4 is mercy. Serving gift number 4 is mercy. We find the gift of mercy in the list of gifts that are found in Romans chapter 12. In fact, Romans chapter 12 verse 8 says, "The one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, and then the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. Mercy, the Greek word for mercy means to show pity, to show mercy, to show compassion. It means to show concern for someone that is in serious need. I define it this way, that the definition of the gift of mercy is the Spirit-given ability to give relief to the misery of people. It is the Spirit-given ability to give relief to the misery of people. That's mercy. It's relieving the misery that people have. Now, this may be new to some of you. I don't think a lot of people think about this. But in the Bible, the word grace and the word mercy are actually two different things. We tend to use them interchangeably, but in the Bible, grace and mercy are completely different. In the Bible, grace is extended in response to the guilt of men. Men are guilty before God, and so God is gracious toward them because they are guilty. But mercy is not extended for guilt. Mercy is extended in response to the misery of men. Throughout the Gospels, we see men born into misery, and Jesus shows them mercy. Some men brought misery upon themselves, and we still see Jesus showing them mercy. Here's a simple way to remember it. Grace is in response to a man's sin, but mercy is in response to a man's situation. Grace is the response of God for your sin, but mercy is God's response to your situation. You notice there is no grace gift. They're all grace gifts, but there is no grace of gift. There is no gift of grace. Why? Because only God can deal with a man's sin. But there is a gift of mercy because we can help in people's situation. The Bible is full of examples of God showing mercy. Mercy on the blind, Matthew 9:27. And as Jesus passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying aloud, "Not have grace on us, have mercy on us, Son of David." Why? Because our situation is bad. It is dire. We are blind and we can't see. We see mercy on those with a demon-possessed family member. Matthew 15:22, and behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." We see mercy on a boy with epilepsy. Matthew 17, verse 14, and when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly, for often he falls into the fire and often into the water." You see, in each of these scenarios, Jesus is asked to show mercy upon the situation that people find themselves in. We've been looking at every gift by putting it in a case, C.A.S.E, the counterfeit, the anatomy, the shadow, and then the execution of that gift. So, what is the counterfeit for the gift of mercy? The counterfeit for the true gift of mercy, I think, is emotional sentimentalism. This natural emotion from people often seeks to alleviate a person's suffering without getting to the root cause. These are the kinds of people that we would just call a bleeding heart. You ever met somebody like that? Somebody who there is never somebody that they can't help fix. There's never a problem that they're not willing to just dive into. They are a person with a bleeding heart, and they just naturally feel sympathy toward people. That's good, but it may not be the gift of mercy. You see, often people with the fake gift or the counterfeit gift of mercy, oftentimes they ignore God's commands in order to alleviate somebody's pain. If you just have a natural emotional sentimentalism, then all you're focused on is alleviating the problem. But if you have the gift of mercy, you're looking at alleviating the problem so that you can get to the root issue, which is the person's relationship and obedience to Jesus. Let me see if I can illustrate it for us. Imagine that a teenage son steals money from his mom's purse and buys a couple new video games with the stolen money. Now, I'm not passively aggressively attacking my children. Nobody in my house has done this. All right, but this teenage boy steals money from his mom's purse. He goes to Walmart and he buys a bunch of new video games. When the parents discover what has happened and they quiz him, the son explains that he's having a hard time at school. His grades are suffering, he's being bullied, and he thought that the video games would help him feel better. Parents with a counterfeit mercy would say something like this: we understand why you did it. It wasn't the right thing to do, but go on and enjoy those video games. You see, the parents confused grace and mercy. Their sympathy for the student's school experience caused them to ignore the fact that they had stolen. See the difference? The gift of mercy says, man, my heart breaks that this is happening to you, and I will do whatever I can to alleviate what you're in, but you stole. And there's a consequence for doing wrong. You see the difference? Mercy is one that operates inside of the commands of God. And sometimes there's a counterfeit mercy that runs around just trying to clothe everyone and feed everyone and house everyone, but they don't deal with the commands of God in the lives of the individual. That's just emotional sentimentalism. That is not the gift of mercy. What part of the body, since we as a church are one body and some of us have the gift of mercy, what part of the body is the gift of mercy? The gift of mercy, I think, is a lot like the tears of the human body. Your tears are actually way more complex than you might realize or know. If an irritant gets into your eye, what's your body do? It creates tears because it's trying to flush out the irritant. Many of you come up to me and said, you look weird without glasses. You didn't say it that way, but I know that's what you meant. And I know. Last Friday, I went to the eye doctor and got a wild hair and said, I'm going to try contacts. What you don't understand is I've lived with an eye phobia for 43 years. I can't stand anything in my eye. I can't stand anything touching my eye. And finally, at the age of 43, I said, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to learn how to touch my eyeball like a normal human. So me and the Lord and my eye have fought in a bathroom for about a week and a half. I'm getting better at it. But what happens is that contact starts getting close to my eye. And you know what my eyes do? Boom, they water and they blink. Like, no, you're not getting in there. Okay? But we know, coaching baseball, it's a common thing. Kid slides into the base, and guess what happens to the coach? Face full of dust. You have to rub your eyes and try to get the dust out, right? And what does your body do? It creates tears to flush out the irritant. That's what people with the gift of mercy do. When there's an irritation in your life, there's a situation, a problem, a misery in your life, they are like the tears of the body that they can come to you and they can help you and they can flush out that irritant of what is going on. That's the true gift of mercy. But you don't only cry when you are irritated. Some of you cry emotional tears. All the men just looked at their wives. One woman looked at her husband, but I won't mention who that was. This is a true story. When Amanda was born, her tear ducts were actually clogged. And the doctor, on her one-day-old event, had to go in and unclog, remove the obstruction, so that she could produce tears. I've never met this man, but I can vouch for his work to you. He did a very good job because she hasn't stopped crying since day one, since he finished his procedure. Now, when you're emotionally troubled, you may not know this, but when you're emotionally bothered, your body produces hormones. We call them ACTH hormones. They're just called the stress hormones. You may not know that, but when you're stressed and troubled, your body creates these stress hormones. And they're floating around through your body and they're wreaking havoc on everything because your body is dealing with these stress hormones. You know how your body rids itself of stress hormones? Through your tears. When you are emotional and you are crying, what is happening is your body is flushing out the stress hormones out of your eyes. That's why a lot of times when people are emotional and they have an issue and they cry, they talk about how they feel lighter and they feel like a burden was lifted. That's because your body just flushed out all of its stress hormones through your tears. I think it's a perfect example for what the gift of mercy is. You're stressed, you're irritated, there's a problem in your life, and somebody with the Spirit-given ability to alleviate and to help with the misery that you're in comes along, and like those good watery tears, they're able to flush out of you what is desperately needed to be gone. What is the shadow? What is the temptation, the dark side to the gift of mercy? I think the dark side for people with the gift of mercy is that they can easily start to excuse people's sin because of their situation. The gift of mercy is so keyed in on the misery of others that they can begin to make excuses for people in misery. They can get so locked in on the misery that they can fail to see the spiritual issue that is the root cause of the misery. What's the execution? What does it look like to use the gift of mercy? I think people with the gift of mercy visit hospitals. They visit nursing homes. They visit people who are shut in, who can't make it to church. They organize and serve in soup kitchens and prison ministries, and they are energized to assist others with the misery that they feel. People with the gift of mercy often have an ability to see the marginalized people in our community, and they're motivated to alleviate that suffering. Listen, mercy is such an aspect of the character of God that Jesus dedicates an entire parable to the idea of mercy. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, a man who alleviated the misery of a stranger who had been beaten up and mugged by thieves. In the parable that Jesus told, various religious figures passed by the injured man, but all of them refused to help. But then a Samaritan, with the gift of mercy, he happens upon the man and he eases his misery by medicating his wounds, by transporting him to safety, and by bankrolling him until he got back on his feet. That is the gift of mercy. Serving gift number 5, the gift of faith. We find the gift of faith in the list of gifts that are found in 1 Corinthians 12. In fact, verse 9 says, to another, faith by the same Spirit. The word faith in the Greek is the word pistis. It means to believe to the extent of complete trust and reliance. To believe in, to have confidence in, to have faith in, to trust. Here's the simple definition of the spiritual gift of faith. It is the Spirit-given ability to believe God. The Spirit-given ability to believe God. That's the gift of faith. I want to make a distinction here. This is not saving faith. There are different types of faith. Every Christian must have saving faith, because there is no other way to become a Christian than by displaying saving faith. This faith is above and beyond the normal kind of faith and the normal belief in God. This is the supernatural ability to really believe God in your circumstances. And it is very, very closely linked and related to the discipline of prayer. What is the counterfeit to the gift of faith? Well, turn on your TV and you'll find it. Counterfeit to the gift of faith is just like the counterfeit to the gift of giving. It is the current counterfeit prosperity gospel that you see and you hear everywhere, especially on TV. You hear garbage like this: if you really believe God, then you'll get your miracle. If you really believe God, then He'll heal your body. If you really believe God, then your finances will improve drastically. Listen to me. This prosperity gospel teaches that faith makes God your genie. You just pray and you rub with enough faith and God has to move. They believe that faith makes God your servant. Famous prosperity gospel preacher, his name's Creflo Dollar, wrote in his book, Understanding God's Purpose for Your Life. I want you to see this quote that he wrote. When we pray, believing that we have already received what we are praying, God has no choice but to make our prayer come to pass. It is a key to getting results as a Christian. Now, I don't think that any of us would go as far as Creflo has in this statement. In fact, one of my favorite, you see it on Facebook all the time, it's called the Babylon Bee. It's a satire news site. It's fake news, but it's fake news for a purpose. It's making a point. My favorite article they ever wrote was that Creflo Dollar changed his name to Moneybags McGee. I just thought that was hilarious. But anyway, I don't think any of us would go as far as Creflo did in this statement. But I think that this counterfeit faith has seeped its way in. But if I'm honest, I hear Christians commonly say things, and I even hear them in Free Will Baptist churches. I hear Christians say things like, I bind the enemy. I speak life over my situation. I decree or I declare that addiction has no power. That sounds powerful and it sounds good, but it's actually a satanic counterfeit to the gift of faith. So how is that a counterfeit? Number one, this theology undermines the sovereignty of God. What happens when you decree something in faith, but it's different from what God sovereignly wants to do? What happens when you bind an enemy that God has sovereignly allowed to be free? See, this language of declaring and decreeing or binding enemies or speaking life, all of it sounds good, but it makes you the authority, not the sovereign God. It makes you the powerhouse that you decreed in faith, so it has to happen no matter what a sovereign God is trying to orchestrate or do. You've binded the enemy. You are the power. And so that enemy is bound no matter what God was trying to do with that enemy loosed. It's inconsistent with the idea of a sovereign God. There's another problem with it. The other problem with this line of theology is that it denies biblical faith. Listen to me. Biblical faith is believing and trusting in God and Him alone. Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. Biblical faith is believing God. It's trusting God and nothing else. When you start this decreeing, declaring, binding, speaking life, when you start doing that stuff, it all depends on how much faith you have. If you have enough faith to declare, it'll happen. If you have enough faith to bind, the enemy must leave. If you have enough faith to speak life, then your words bring healing. In each of these scenarios, the deciding factor is not what an omnipotent, omniscient, sovereign God wants to do. The deciding factor is how much faith you have. That's not biblical faith. Biblical faith is rooted in one object, and it is God and God alone. So what part of the body would the gift of faith be? This may seem counterintuitive, but it makes sense to me. The gift of faith is like the eyes of the body. Now I know about half of you just went, no. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It can't be the eyes. Well, what the Hebrew writer is saying there is that faith is the evidence of things not seen by the physical eye. I think faith is like sight for the spiritual body. A person with the gift of faith has the ability to see the promises of God. They can see His mighty power. They can see the character of God and how He operates, all so that the church, the body, can move confidently. When we got to Columbus, we checked in our hotel room. We went to bed, turned off the lights, and I had a 7:30 meeting on Monday morning. So I get up in a room that I'm not familiar with tons of furniture that I don't know about, and I start that treacherous journey to the bathroom in the dark. I don't know how many things I tripped on, but it would have been easier to count the things in the room that I didn't trip on. I was beat and banged and bruised by the time I got to the bathroom, and my day hadn't even started. What was the problem? I couldn't see. You see, so many times a church body is fumbling around. They don't know whether to do this, or they don't know whether to do that. And I think oftentimes it's people with the spiritual gift of faith that are our eyes that help us see the path that the Lord wants us to go. What's the shadow or the temptation to the gift of faith? I think there are several things that a person with the gift of faith must be on guard against. I think they need to be on guard against impatience with those who don't have the gift of faith. We can't see what you see. You have a supernatural gift to see it. We don't see what you see. So they need to learn how to have patience for those who don't see it like them. I think they can also develop pride in their gift. A person with this gift can become accustomed to bold outcomes and answered prayers. And so they can begin to feel pride for their gift. And I think a person with the gift of faith can start to view wisdom and prudence as a lack of faith. Because a person with the gift of faith has a unique ability to trust God, they can start to view people who want to use wisdom and prudence as, well, you just don't have faith. But the God of faith is also the God of wisdom, and we have to balance those two. What does it look like to use the gift of faith? This gift has a deep connection to prayer, and so a person with the gift of faith engages in deep intercessory prayer for others. People with the gift of faith have a strong ability to see and trust the promises of God. What's an example of it? Acts 27. Paul had been arrested by the Romans, and he's being transported to Rome to stand trial. They're getting ready to board a ship, and Paul warns them of a storm that is coming, and the Romans ignored Paul's warning. And here's what happened, verse 21. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, "Men, I told you so. You should have listened to me and not set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I believe God. I trust God. I have faith in God. It will be exactly as I have told you. But we must run aground on some island.'" That's the gift of faith. One final gift, the gift of discernment. Serving gift number 6, the gift of discernment. This one is also found in 1 Corinthians 12. Verse 10, he says, "To another, the ability to distinguish between spirits." The word distinguish means the ability to evaluate and judge. In this context, what Paul is saying is this is the ability to evaluate and judge between spirits. Is something the Spirit of God, or is something another demonic spirit? There's a lot of controversy over this gift. I'm going to give you my best educated opinion on what it is. I think this gift is a watchdog gift. It's a gift that God gave the church to protect us and to keep us pure. What's the counterfeit of the gift? Well, since the true gift of discernment is the ability to know whether something is truly from God or not, the counterfeit is a toxic, hyper-suspicious, hyper-critical spirit that actively hunts for flaws in everything and everyone just to argue. You ever met that guy? He's a lot of fun, isn't he? You see, people with the counterfeit of discernment, they're constantly looking for what is wrong or what is flawed, and they find it everywhere. They can't sit through a sermon without finding a mistake or an error. They can't sing a song they hear on the radio because if it were true, it wouldn't be on the radio. This is the counterfeit of the gift, because it seems like the person has the ability to evaluate things, but in reality, it is just the result of their critical and judgmental heart. What body part is the gift of discernment? The gift of discernment works like the white blood cells of the human body. Your white blood cells are constantly traveling and scanning cells in your body to make sure that each cell is healthy and replicating properly. Your white blood cells, they scan every cell in your body and they ask one question: do you belong here? Or are you a foreign invader? That's all your white blood cells do. And that's exactly what the gift of discernment does. People with the gift of discernment have a spirit-given ability to detect hypocrisy, to detect false spirits, and to know that something is a foreign invader, that it does not belong in the body. What's the shadow or the temptation of the gift? The dark side of this gift is a proud, cynical, condemning spirit that judges motives harshly rather than operating like a shield. Some Christians who truly have the gift of discernment allow themselves to become what I call Christian mall cops. You ever met a mall cop, never had any action, but tries to make everything action? They make mountains out of molehills because they feel as though if they're not uncovering heresy or revealing hypocrisy, then they aren't really using their gift. What does it look like to use the gift of discernment? People with the gift of discernment carefully evaluate teachings and trends against Scripture, not opinion. And they gently but firmly alert leadership or brothers and sisters when deception is present. The gift of discernment also, we learn in the book of Corinthians, we'll look at this in a minute, is there to help Christians settle disputes among themselves. I'm going to give you an example of each use of the gift of discernment. The first one is the evaluating spirits found in Acts 16. In Acts 16, Paul is establishing the church at Philippi, and it's one of my favorite stories of Paul and his missionary journeys. Verse 16. As we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. She followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation." Now, imagine that you've moved to a new city. There's no church there, and your goal is you've moved there to start one. You're traveling around, you're teaching, and all of a sudden, a citizen of that place starts following you around and kind of shouting out before you would get to a place, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation." What do you think? Seems pretty good, right? I mean, you're getting free press. You're getting free publicity. One of their citizens is vouching for you. Man, it seems good. This girl is going before them and letting everybody know that these men are servants of the Most High God. Is that true? Yes. And they proclaim to you the way of salvation. Is that true? Yes. Everything seems good. Verse 18. And this she kept doing for many days. Paul, having become greatly annoyed, turned and said to the Spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out that very hour. The servant girl was running around shouting in front of them because she was demon-possessed. The utilization of the gift of discernment, the ability to evaluate, Paul had it. Paul knew that even though what this girl said was true, Paul knew that it wasn't the Spirit of God leading her to do that. Paul discerned that it was a fake. It was a demonic spirit. And he finally, greatly annoyed, said, "Get out!" See, it's not just enough to be true. The spirit of discernment can evaluate the source of what is true. I also told you that the gift of discernment is used to settle disputes among Christians. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 5, Paul said, "I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers?" The word there for settle a dispute, it's the same Greek word that he used for the gift of discernment. Is there no one there among you who is wise enough to discern between the brothers? So the gift of discernment is also given to the church so that when two of you don't get along over some issue, a person with the gift of discernment can step in and help solve the problem. So these are the serving gifts. Do you have the gift of mercy? Find ways to exercise your gift. Mend wounds. Help the broken, but bring them the good news. Do you have the gift of faith? Are you able to see the promises of God in a unique way? Find ways to exercise your gift. Encourage others with what you're seeing by faith. If you think you have the gift of faith, pray diligently, consistently. Sign up for the Echo ministry of our church so that you can pray. Participate in the 938 initiative so that you can pray. Download the Bless app and put in your address and pray. Do you think you might have the gifts of discernment? Are you able to evaluate whether someone is saying something truly from God or whether it's a false spirit? Then exercise your gift. Be bold. Learn how to speak up when something isn't right. I think it leads us to ask one more question of ourselves. Have you expressed saving faith? I already asked, do you have the gift of faith? But remember, that was different from saving faith. We talked about the idea that you can trust God and believe God, but my question is this: have you ever demonstrated saving faith to God? It's the only way that you can actually be a Christian. So what is saving faith? I want you to see what Paul says in Romans chapter 10, verse 9. He said, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So let's reverse engineer this. How do you know if you're saved? Well, you do these two things. Confess that Jesus is Lord. You make Jesus the Lord, the boss, manager, ruler, controller, decision maker of you. And believe that God raised Jesus from the dead. In Appalachia, we're pretty good at belief. We've heard the story of Jesus our entire life. Our public school system is as close to a Christian school as you'll probably ever come against. And you've heard the messages of Jesus, and most people, the overwhelming majority of people in our community, believe that Jesus died, believe that he was perfect, believe that he rose again. Belief's not our problem. Paul said, you must confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe that God raised Jesus from the dead. 50% is zero in the eyes of God. Can I submit to you that if you have confessed, if you believe that Jesus died and rose again, but you have never made Jesus the boss of your life, you have never truly, not just spoken words, you have never put into motion and put into action that Jesus is in charge of me now. It's his life, not mine. He's the boss of me. He decides. When someone asks, it's not what's my opinion, it's let me find out the answer, because I don't even know about myself anymore, because he owns me. If you've never done that, according to the Apostle Paul, you've never been saved. Because you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead. That is saving faith. So do you have it? If you do, then you've got some of these 11 gifts that we've talked about. But if you don't have saving faith, if you've never surrendered your life to him, then today is a day of opportunity for you. In just a moment, I'm going to lead us in a word of prayer and give you an opportunity to display saving faith for the very first time. And you may have walked in here believing. But today you can walk out of here believing and confessing You may have walked in here thinking that you were right with God. But today you can walk out knowing that you're right with God. Why? Because God cannot lie. And the God who cannot lie said through His Spirit, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, you will be saved.